Hello, I'm going to be giving an update on the war in Ukraine. And one of the top stories is, under pressure from European leaders, Russia supposedly will start allowing Ukrainian wheat and oilseeds to be exported through their Baltic Sea ports. However, they did warn that ships ferrying to these ports would have to navigate through mine-filled waters. In other news, Russians claim to have attacked a factory in Zaporozhye that they claim was designing and manufacturing engines for aircraft, specifically UAV aircraft. This would supposedly deal a harsh blow to the Ukrainian Air Force. And in other news, the Russian military gave a situational report for the date of May 24th to detail losses on the Donbass area. They claimed Ukrainians had lost over 300 militants and 46 armed fighting vehicles, 2 jet aircraft, and numerous UAVs. On the ground, the Russians and LPR have made decent progress over in the Grozny Liman area. They supposedly have most of that city in their control, and this is where they have started to take in many prisoners. Supposedly 300 to 500 prisoners have already laid down their arms. Others had tried to flee. There are very few routes out of this area. Most are under heavy fire. I posted on a video yesterday showing some of the Ukrainians trying to exit. I have another video that is pretty interesting. And in Severodonetsk, it's fairly much the same situation. The Ukrainians have been pushed into the suburbs, hiding amongst the civilian population, using their houses for firing positions. And the bulk of the Ukrainian forces is trapped in this area. There's little hope of them being able to exit from this cauldron. They have been encircled. They're under heavy fire. They're logistically cut off, so they're going to have issues with resupply. And this is also something that the Ukrainians' leadership is noticing, especially President Zelensky, and he's been trying to drop a few truth bombs, trying to prepare their media to the fact that there are big losses coming, and it's only, quote, going to get worse. A rather large narrative switch from Ukraine winning every day to now Ukraine losing, and losing bigly. So, this is, as I mentioned before in another video, this is going to be the game changer for this entire war when the hammer falls on this this cauldron, and there's going to be approximately 10,000 to 15,000 Ukrainian troops that will most likely need to lay down their arms. So this is a significant blow, and this will be probably the largest defining moment in the entire war up to this point. Okay, and lastly, I just kind of want to, outline what I feel are like 5 or 6, major points on like why Ukraine, is in this situation. Like, why is the Ukraine military like losing so badly, opposed to, the narrative? You kind of have to get through that. that narrative, and you have to do your own research. And once you kind of break through that fog and you start to see the truth, and that's one thing my channel tries to do, because there's no balance of information. It's like 99%, fake narratives, and like maybe 1% trying to have someone putting out what's really happening, So that's one objective of this channel. Now, these are the 5 or 6 things I think that are really hurting the Ukrainians. One is morale. Number 2 is training. Number 3 is weapons. Number 4, a civilian that's not backing your military. Number 5, leadership. And number 6 is logistics. Okay, so let's kind of go up these reverse order. Logistics. This is where the Russians had been attacking the logistic network of the Ukrainian military from the beginning, and this is where I think a lot of these armchair quarterback generals and all these supposed experts not to mention they're just basically liars, but they didn't quite understand what the Russians were doing. This is where you had those 450 artillery and missile strikes every night for 2 months. That's what they were doing. They were attacking oil depots, ammunition, bunkers, command and control, highways, rail lines, and so on. Okay, and this ties into another one of these points I'm making, and that is the weapons. And they have been targeting Western weapons shipments. And keep in mind that the Russians have eyes on the ground. And that's something the mainstream media in the United States is not telling you. The Russians are everywhere in Ukraine. Keep in mind, like half of Ukraine is Russian speaking or from ethnic Russian background. They're everywhere. They know where all these shipments are going. The 155 millimeter howitzers that just got over there from the United States that were plastered all over the news is how, the United States, gonna win the war over there with their equipment. Well, that was blown up as it was being unloaded from the trucks up near the front lines. And in one of my previous videos, I put footage of that. There's a UAV tracking those. So, the Russians have everything monitored by UAVs, all their train lines, the infrared cameras on all these, these UAVs and satellites, and they're following the roads and the vehicles on the roads. So, this is where, the Ukrainians are trying all kinds of ingenious things, like using Red Cross vehicles to transport weapons and so on, trying to hide. Now, the other problem with the weapons is that the United States sent over a huge amount of basically infantry level, handheld weapons used against tanks and aircraft like the Stingers and Javelins and so on. Now, these have a shelf life. They have batteries in them. Okay. Now, the Russians demonstrate that a lot of the batteries were discharged. They were dead. And so where are Ukrainians going to get batteries for these things on the battlefield? And these things have a fail rate of like 50 to 75%. So who's going to stand up out of their trench and take a shot at a Russian tank using a weapon that has a failure rate of up to 75%? The shelf life on a lot of this stuff is like 5 years. Some of these weapons, they demonstrate they have shelf lives that have over 20 years that were shipped out. Okay, and so you can see that it's almost suicidal to use some of these things. And this is why when you see the Russians going into these Ukrainian, especially like trenches or these, apartment buildings they've taken over and used as firing positions, there's going to be a huge stash of all these weapons. And they're not being used. They're still in the boxes. If these things were all great, they would be empty cases everywhere, right? So, this is a huge problem. And the problem is so huge that Zelensky actually had to make a decree that if you criticize the Western weapons, that there was significant punishment. So this was passed down to the troops and the leadership of the Ukrainians. So imagine that. Why would you need to have that kind of a decree? Okay, then you get down on the list, you got leadership. The Ukrainian leadership, a lot of it was destroyed with these, the missile and artillery strikes. These are all pinpointed by UAVs. Now, the Ukrainian leadership is usually contacted by the troops on their cell phone in the rear of the lines. And they're hiding. Now, I'm going to post a video here of a commander in a village who's being confronted by the civilians. Like, why he isn't there in the front lines with his troops. Why they die. And this guy, he's caught red-handed. And it's captured on video for everyone to see. And this is very typical. When you watch the Ukrainian troops who basically is saying that they refuse to fight anymore, this is one of the major complaints, is that the leadership basically abandoned them. So what does that do to morale? And that's our next big problem for the Ukrainian troops, is the morale. Imagine being under massive artillery bombardment day and night. And it's not just like artillery like most people think about, like going back in World War II. People kind of have that in their heads, like, maybe Vietnam War, or you see some shells come down and it's not like that anymore. It's being pinpointed with UAVs now. Spotter UAVs. So they can drop a shell literally in the middle of a trench. And the Russians also have the, quote, kamikaze drones as well. And you can find video of those actually in action if you look for them. It's pretty scary. Now, there's probably nothing worse for morale than constant, persistent, heavy artillery and rocket shelling. So this especially affects positions that are not heavily, constructed, which is like most of them. Most, they bragged, I remember in the beginning that the Ukrainian military put out, certain propaganda about how dug in they were. But when you look at these positions, like on the battlefield, through these videos, you find that these positions are pretty minimal. Like something that, like you had some shovels and you told people in a few days you had to dig like a little trench. There's no like anti-tank guns. There's no like anti-aircraft guns. Like, other than the handheld stuff. There's no long-range weaponry accessible to the infantry unit. Mortars, things like this. There's very few heavy weaponry. It's just infantry level stuff. So, you've got the fact that you don't have the right weapons. You've got conscripts as reinforcements with zero training. These people are probably whining all the time and they just want to get out of there. They're afraid to die. And you can imagine what that must be like. Then they throw in foreign mercenaries in your unit. They don't even speak your language. and they're ill-armed. And they want to get the hell out of there. Once, so they had a taste of fire, they didn't get paid, they just want to get the hell out of there. Watch the video, search for the Canadian sniper, and kind of get a good insight what it's like as a foreigner over there. And the French Marine who goes over there, and he has a lot of good stories telling you what's really happening and the mistreatment of the civilians. Keep in mind, like me, we both thought that there was something maybe to the Ukrainians, that they had, a good fight here. And he went over there to fight for them. And he saw what was really happening. Okay? Now, and this is the main thing that destroys the morale of the troops of the Ukrainians. And it fits in with you losing the support of the civilians. When you are looked at as the parasite, and the civilians are shooting at you, and you see other units and others in your unit acting like thugs and looting and stealing pigs from the farmer, or going into houses and stealing things, food, stealing cars, raping women, how does that affect your morale when your commander basically condones these behaviors? Mariupol, they went around driving around in the streets in tanks, just blowing up houses and apartments. I mean, if you were like a well-trained military person, disciplined and so on, and you saw that stuff going on, how would that make you feel? As willing to fight alongside people like that, gangsters and thugs, NZs, Azov Battalion. These people are hailed as freedom fighters and heroes. But when in the reality, you find out who these people really are, they're a bunch of thugs and gangsters. So this is the factors that I would contribute to the demise of the Ukrainian army. And a lot of these things were preventable. Some of these things, not all of them, but I think they could have given the Russians a lot better of a fight with competent leadership. And then when you find out that there's viral videos going around out there, when you have like Azov Battalion thugs like shooting Russian POWs and shooting their groins, murdering them, maiming them. There's another video that they just uncovered, a group of Russian POWs. They had their hands tied behind their back. Sound familiar? And they were found they were burned as well to hide their bodies. And their remains are found in the rubble of a home in one of the cities that they liberated. Okay, so this is probably going on in a lot of places. Okay, how would you feel if you're a professional soldier and you saw a viral video of that? Now, to a thug and a gangster, that was probably like a good thing, right? But to a professional soldier, those are the things that you don't want to be part of. Those are the things where you just want to get away from those people. You want to get out of there. Or you want to go surrender. Because you don't want to be part of those kind of people. Okay? So those are, just some of my thoughts. And, I guess I've gone over lots of videos, lots of testimonies, POW testimonies, civilian testimonies, video footage, and these are some of the conclusions that I'm seeing, and I'm just sharing my thoughts on because a lot of people are going to look back and they go, wow, the Ukrainians had such a huge army. They were supposed to be so well trained. They were supposed to be ready for the Russians. They had a very large army, well armed. They had a lot of the same equipment that the Russians did. Rocket artillery, S-300 systems, very large air force, a lot of UAVs, battle experience. They had a lot of things going for them, on face value. But this is not the whole story. And this is where, if you're following the mainstream media, that's the narrative that they're telling you. But I'm telling you, when you look at the reality, you find out that narrative is a lie. And those 5 or 6 things that I mentioned are the deciding factors on why the reality rules and that the Ukrainians are going to lose here in a very big way. And they already are. I mean, it's just being hidden from you. And, this is where Zelensky is trying to kind of, through his spokesperson, basically, just trying to prepare people for, getting them ready, prepped for that. There's going to be some really bad news, and it's going to get a lot worse. Okay? So they know they have to switch up the narrative here, because when the Russians showed the videos of thousands of Ukrainian troops being put into detention centers, this is not going to go very well, and they know it's a lot worse the more they lie about it at this point. So they're not coming clean here. They just know that if they try to stick to this narrative, they're completely exposed as just bold-faced liars. Which, of course they already are if you do your own work and figure out what's going on. They've been lying from the get-go. It should really, instead of defending these people and sticking up for them and wearing, Ukraine lapels, you should be outraged that you were lied to and that you were swindled out of, $55 billion if you live in the United States. Because all that money is just going to line these politicians' pockets. Zelensky's already made $500 million off of this. This is a 2-bit actor, fraudster. None of this money is going to the Ukrainian people. They're the losers in all this. If you really were for the Ukrainian people, then the last people you would want to defend is people like fraudster Zelensky and Azov Battalion. I mean, these are people who are trying to destroy that country, right? So, I'm just trying to throw some reality on a little dose of reality on this whole thing. And I originally fell for a lot of this stuff too. It took me a little while to sort through everything. I'm just like that kind of person. I don't like to be lied to. It just makes me, get even more interested in trying to find out what's really going on. And when I started doing that, it was like, oh my God, what is going on? This is scary. How many people are being bamboozled here? It's epic. So anyway, thanks for listening, and I'll try to give an update soon enough. Bye.